Good evening, everybody. The Music Van is back, bringing smiles to the faces, knowledge to the people, and most importantly, music to the masses. And I am back with another part of the Digging Through Discographies with Stone Temple Pilots. Now, in the last video, we talked about Shangri-La-Dee-Da, which was the last album the band dropped before they broke up. This particular album that we're going to be talking about tonight, Stone Temple Pilots, was dropped in 2010, which means we have a lot to get to before we talk about this album. So, what happened during that time? Well, basically every single member went in their own separate ways with different projects. Whelan became the singer of the supergroup Velvet Revolver with Guns N' Roses members Slash, Matt Sorum, and Duff McKagan, as well as former Wasted Youth guitarist Dave Kushner. The band released two albums, Contraband in 2004 and Libertad in 2007, before breaking up in 2008. Likewise, the DeLeo brothers formed the supergroup Army of Anyone with vocalist Richard Patrick from the band Filter and session drummer Roy Nuzier. The band released its self-titled album in 2006 before going on indefinite hiatus in 2007. Eric Kretz kept a lower profile during this time, operating his own studio, Bomb Shelter Studios, and drumming for the band Spiral Alarms. According to Dean DeLeo, steps towards a Stone Temple Pilots reformation started with a phone call from Whelan's wife, Mary Forsberg. She invited the DeLeo brothers to play at a private beach party, which led to the reconciliation of Whelan and the DeLeo brothers. Later, Whelan left Velvet Revolver to rejoin Stone Temple Pilots, and they announced that they were reuniting for a 65-date North American tour. After that, everyone wanted to start working on a new album. However, there was some legal issues during that time. On June 12, 2008, Atlantic Records filed a lawsuit against Whelan and Eric Kretz, claiming the two had threatened to terminate their contract unless changes were made. Stone Temple Pilots had delivered 6 albums, 5 studio records, and the compilation album Thank You, and Atlantic wanted a 7th album with an option for 2 more. The band was pretty surprised by this statement, but basically boiled down to Whelan wanting to be away from Atlantic Records for a couple different reasons. One, because he wanted to have a little bit more creative and lucrative freedom from that particular record company, but also he didn't really know anyone there anymore since the last album that the band had dropped 7 years ago at that point. However, everyone was able to come to an agreement. As their band attorney, Gary Steffelman, said, basically there was a misunderstanding during contract negotiations, and a representative for Atlantic stated that the lawsuit had been voluntarily dismissed, which gave now Stone Temple Pilots a little bit more creative freedom. Robert and Dean began writing new material by November 2008, which marked the first time that the band had written together since the Army of Anyone's only release. The recording process took place over a period of 10 months, due largely to the band's touring schedule, but the majority of the actual studio time was spent experimenting with different instruments and miking techniques. Pre-production for the album took place at Eric Kretz's Bomb Shelter Studios. It consisted mainly of Dean, Robert, and Kretz sifting through musical ideas. Dean and Robert self-produced this album, which made it the first time that they weren't working with their longtime producer, Brendan O'Brien, mainly because they weren't part of Atlantic Records anymore. The reason why they wanted to do this is because it freed the band from the constraints of any outside producer's schedule. The recording process could then be intertwined with tour dates, which Dean said resulted in improved performances on the record. Now, the interesting thing about this is, throughout this whole entire time, Whelan is not part of this writing process because at this time he is out there promoting his second solo studio album, Happy in Galoshes. So, by this time, in 2009, he is getting demo CDs where he hears the completed demos of all these songs, including scratch melodies, which Whelan had the option to use or discard. From there, Whelan writes the lyrics, he changes up a little bit of the ideas on some of these songs, and basically sends them back to Dean and Robert, who are surprised at the direction that he would take on some of these songs, because it sounded like it could have been composed by a person with an entirely different vision. Robert, though, said that he was fine with this because it was giving everyone a way of shaping ideas and working as independent people rather than one cohesive band with one particular mindset. They also did have an additional producer in Don Was who helped keep Whelan and the rest of the band's separate recording sessions in sync by bringing them together to perform live, where the band would play acoustically so they could hear the nuances of the songs. Whelan was also credited with Watts for helping Stone Temple Pilots relearn how to play together again, and did help with the recording of Whelan's vocals. By June 2009, the band had written 18 songs, 12 of which were planned to be released on the album, with B-sides for Japan, United Kingdom, and Europe selected from the remaining songs. Recording began in early 2009, at times taking place in 3 studios simultaneously. Basslines and overdubs were recorded at Home Fry Studio, located in the basement of Robert's house. The majority of Cinnamon and First Kiss on Mars, including drums, were recorded at that studio as well. Dean's guitar work was recorded at Kretz's Bomb Shelter Studios, and Whelan's vocals were recorded at Whelan's studios called Lavish Studios. By early December, 9 songs had been finished, and the entire record was completed later that month. Mixing began in January 2010 by Chris Lord-Alge, and mastering for the album was completed in February by Ted Jensen at Sterling Sound. The album had 3 singles: Between the Lines, which was released on March 22, 2010, Take a Load Off on June 15, 2010, and Cinnamon on September 21, 2010. And the album itself was released on May 21, 2010. Now, the first thing that you would hear from this album is gone are the hard rock ideas, gone are the grunge ideas, the jazz ideas. This is a back to basics 60s and 70s style rock album. It has tinges of psychedelic rock, it has tinges of glam rock, it has tinges of country in here. You're getting a lot of that throughout this album. And honestly, that's what they were trying to do with this album. The band was listening to 60s and 70s and country music at this time, and Dean himself was drawing inspirations from 1960s guitarists like Jimmy Bryant, Speedy West, Hank Garland, Pete Drake, Hank Snow, and Aerosmith's Brad Whitford. The result of that is a lot of songs that have 60s and 70s tinges as well as country tinges. You get songs that are more 70s inspired, but with Between the Lines and Take a Load Off, as well as Hazy Days and Fast as I Can. Then you also get more country songs like Huckleberry Crumble, Hickory Dichotomy, Fast as I Can as well. And then you get those more glam-ish 60s songs like Cinnamon, like Dare If You Dare, and like Bagman. And then you even get a little bit of more out there kind of David Bowie sounds with First Kiss on Mars. So throughout this album, you're getting a more old style sound. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I do enjoy a lot of this album. I think this fits Whelan's voice very well. This is the best that he has sounded in a very long time. And I think it's because they're more influenced on that glam sound than they have in a very long time. Also, that country sound fits his voice very well as well. The guitar work on a lot of these songs are very interesting as well. My favorites being Take a Load Off, Huckleberry Crumble, Dare If You Dare, Cinnamon, Bagman, Fast as I Can, and Maver. All of them having some very beautiful work that doesn't have to be filled with distortion to come off as a very interesting idea. The drums are also pretty solid, especially on Between the Lines, Cinnamon, Hazy Days, and Fast as I Can. I will say though, for me, the bass doesn't really stand out as much as previous albums. The only ones that having some interesting bass work is Bagman and Fast as I Can. Some of my favorite songs on here, Take a Load Off, one of the more heavier rock songs on here that has some really cool ideas of changing up the meter, as well as one of the better choruses on the album. Between the Lines also hits a little bit harder, which is why I like it a little bit more. The harmonies on here are nice, and it sounds like Whelan's having a lot of fun on this song. Dare If You Dare feels a little bit more Beatles-esque with a little bit of tinge of Bowie. It's a fun song. I like the chord progression on here, and the guitar solo on here is also fantastic. There's a lot of really good guitar solos on here. Dare If You Dare is definitely one of them, as well as Between the Lines, Take a Load Off. Maver has a great one, and then Huckleberry Crumble and Hickory Dichotomy has some slide guitar solos on there. Bagman also has some good guitar solos on here. This is, again, a quintessential kind of old school album with a lot of guitar work and a lot of guitar solos. I will say with Dare If You Dare, it is a little bit cheesy in terms of lyrics, which we will get to in a little bit later. Cinnamon is also one that I really like. I just like the glam style on here. I wish there was a little bit more substance to it, and I wish the bridge part, which is pretty interesting, is a little bit longer. But it's fun and a nice listen And then rounding out my favorite songs is Maver. It's one of the nicer outros that they have done. Definitely better than their previous outro, and definitely to me better than Where the River Goes. I think it's a really nice way of ending the album, and it has, again, a beautiful guitar solo. A couple other to talk about real quick. First Kiss on Mars, not my favorite song. It feels a little bit out of place, but it has this really interesting Bowie-esque idea. Whelan at first stated was he was looking for a country song with a little bit more acoustic idea, and I guess that turns into a Bowie song. The way that he sings is very Bowie-esque. And then Hickory Dichotomy and Huckleberry Crumble are the two most country-sounding songs, and they're fun. I would say between the two, I like Huckleberry Crumble a little bit better because it gets more into that sound and is a little bit more like swampy, if you will. Hickory Dichotomy is nice and does have some cool slide guitar ideas, but I think the way that Whelan sings on here, it doesn't really work. And that leads me to the problems that I have with this album. The biggest thing is that for all the interesting arrangements, there isn't as much substance as I would like. Meaning that a lot of these songs, while they are nice, doesn't leave much of a memorable impression. For me, every time I listen to this, I always forget what Pico sounds like, and I always forget what First Kiss on Mars sounds like. And then Hazy Days, even though it's the hardest song on the album in terms of just like being a little bit more energetic, as well as Fast As I Can, neither of them really stand out in the discography of Stone Temple Pilots. And even my favorite songs on these albums and the singles themselves don't really stand out in the pantheon of STP singles. And the other problem I have with this album is, even though this is the first time that Whelan is writing lyrics that aren't focused mostly on his addictions or his failed relationships or about him, they still kind of come off that way. And honestly, some of the lyrics are not the most cohesive or the most coherent, if you will. A lot of people who have listened to this album also state the same problem, where some of these lyrics are like baffling in terms of what exactly he's trying to say here, and then some of them just come off as a little bit too cliched. Bagman, in particular, is this song about drug addiction, but the way that it comes off almost feels like a 60s cartoon at times. Bagman, Dare If You Dare, it's trying to be about like peace and love and happiness, and it gets a little bit too much cliched in that way without ever saying a message. Songs like Cinnamon are a little bit cliched. It's a song about him singing what he would say to his ex-wife if he was back with her. The lyrics get a little bit too cliche, where like the chorus itself is, yeah, come on now, yeah, come on. And there's always, hear me, can you hear me, hear me, can you hear me. It gets a little bit too repetitive, and it doesn't really make for an interesting lyrical song. There's parts on Between the Lines and Take a Load Off and Huckleberry Crumble where like the lyrics get weird. A lot of these lyrics get a little bit weird. On Between the Lines you get like, she likes fish but don't like superficial people, or like just all Huckleberry Crumble, which kind of works because of just the swamp nature of this song. Honestly, the lyrics to me, not the most interesting part of this album, comparatively to some of the other lyrics that he's written over his time. I'll say that the flow of this album is good too, though. Because it's not like substantial, it goes by pretty quickly, and most of the arrangements are beautiful enough where you're getting a payout for what you're putting into it. So, where I would place this in terms of the discography ranking, it's definitely not better than the first three albums. I would say it's right around those 4, 5, and 6, where I could easily make a case for every one of them being better than the other. At this point in time, I'll say this is a little bit better than number 4. And again, I go back to the same argument that I made with number 4. Even though some of the songs are better and some of the singles are better, too much of it sounds too formulaic and sounds like other songs that are better. Whereas at least this one has some more interesting arrangements and the flow is a little bit better. With that in mind, my rankings now are number 6 is number 4, number 5 is Stone Temple Pilots, number 4 is Shangri-La Dee Da, number 3 is Core, number 2 is Tiny Music, and number 1 is Purple. Now, Stone Temple Pilots peaked at number 2 on the Billboard 200 chart, selling 61,933 copies in its first week. The album, unfortunately, was prevented from reaching number 1 by the television soundtrack Glee, the Music, Volume 3, Showstoppers. What a crazy world we're living in now. The album dropped to number 16 in its second week and to number 45 in its third week. The album also peaked at number 1 on the Billboard's Hard Rock and Rock album charts, as well as number 1 on the Alternative Songs chart. Songs for the album dropped 70% in the second week, selling 18,601 copies, and continued to drop another 44% in its third week, selling 10,473 copies. The fourth week saw sales drop 18% with 8,538 copies sold. Between Lines peaked at number 1 on the Alternative Songs, number 2 on the Mainstream Rock, and number 1 on the Rock Songs chart, and Take a Load Off peaked at number 24 on both the Alternative and Rock Songs charts. So unfortunately, this is where Stone Temple Pilots hits kind of a breaking point again. Towards the end of 2010, SCP announced that they were rescheduling several US tour dates so the band could take a short break. So in December 2011, Dean DeLeo told Rolling Stone that they were interested in a possible extended reissue of Core, including live archive material, saying that they had tons of live recordings of that area and basically other stuff that they wanted to throw in there. On January 2nd, 2012, Scott Weiland also commented on the 20th anniversary of Core, saying, "Well, we're doing a lot of special things. There's a lot of archival footage that we're putting together, a coffee table book, hopefully a brand new album, so many ideas, a box set, and then a tour, of course." On June 26th, Stone Temple Pilots released its first ever concert film, Alive in the Windy City, on DVD and Blu-ray. The performance was filmed at a sold-out show in March 2010 at the Rivera Theater in Chicago. But from there, the band began to experience more problems, and suspicions were raised that tensions within the band had arisen again. Despite the band's claims that the fall tour would be celebrating the 20th anniversary of Core, this has not happened. According to Weiland's bandmates, they did not want to do the celebration because they believed that he no longer had the vocal range to perform some of the album's songs. Weiland then decided to perform the latter songs that they did not want to play on a separate solo tour. The rest of the band deciding to hide their anger and frustration towards his decision, causing Weiland to assume that they were all on the same page. Then on December 17th, at a show at Abbotsfield, British Columbia, SCP arrived nearly 2 hours late and cut their set 30 minutes short, angering many fans. The following day, the band released a brief statement announcing that the night's show in Lethbridge, Alberta was cancelled due to Weiland being ordered to go on 48 hours complete vocal rest due to strained vocal cord. December 7th, in response to a public declaration from Weiland that he was completely open to returning to Velvet Revolver and a radio DJ's question about the state of the band, Slash told Minneapolis St. Paul radio station 93X that he had heard rumors Weiland had been fired from Stone Temple Pilots, saying that as a possible reason for Weiland's eagerness to return to Velvet Revolver, something that he had quickly dismissed. And then, on February 27, 2013, Stone Temple Pilots fired Weiland. The firing was officially announced as Weiland left on tour for his solo band. And this is where we leave this. It's interesting that this product came from one of the only times that Weiland was sober during a recording of an album. This one, Core, and Velvet Revolver's Libertad, all three of them are the only albums that Weiland did sober. Core being a great album, but being plagued by a lot of people as a copycat of the sound at the time. Libertad being a good album, and this one also being a solid album, but it makes you wonder, were his addictive influences the reason why he was so good at songwriting? At this point, we will never know, because at this point, he is gone from the band. So it makes you wonder what's going to happen next, but we won't talk about that until next week. If you do like this album, please give this video a like. Let me know what you love or hate about this album. Share this with your friends, and most importantly, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, so that you can see more videos like this. Next week, we will be taking a little bit of a detour from this to talk about an EP from this band that'll help bridge here this album to the future. But until then, this is the Music and I'm signing off.